Welcome to the Great Basin Fire Potential Briefing for Tuesday, June 27th. This is Gina McGuire. Over the next couple of days, we'll continue to see gusty to strong winds across mainly Utah and the Arizona Strip. Today, winds may be a little bit weaker than what we saw yesterday, with gusts around 30 miles per hour and relative humidity still very low, below 10 or 15%. However, as a second cold front drops south, winds will actually increase on Wednesday over the southern half to two-thirds of Utah into the Arizona Strip, with gusts again exceeding 35 or 40 miles per hour, with relative humidity below 10%. Also, a Haines 6 is forecast for central and southern Utah today and tomorrow, which will increase the potential for more plume-dominated fire activity. Winds will decrease Thursday, but still remain breezy, especially over the eastern half of the Great Basin, with winds out of the northwest. Over the past 24 hours, we've seen significant lightning activity across Idaho into northeast Nevada, with more isolated activity into northern and northeast Utah and Wyoming. Rainfall amounts in most areas were generally light, with less than 0.05 of an inch of rainfall reported. However, some of these cells did carry a little bit of precipitation, so we may have seen some brief periods of rainfall. However, again, most areas remain dry, with very gusty outflow winds above 55 or 60 miles per hour reported. Over the last 24 hours, Great Basin fire activity has really increased, with numerous large fires now across southwest Idaho into northeast Nevada, and other initial attack fires further east and south. Over the last 7 to 30 days, we've seen very dry conditions over the last week with no rainfall, with the exception of what little we saw yesterday across Idaho and Nevada, and then some spotty areas of precipitation associated with thunderstorm activity across Utah and the Strip. However, over the last 30 days, we saw no precipitation over southern Nevada, and most other areas remain well below normal. How this has affected our ERCs: we have very high ERCs above the 90th or 97th percentile over the southern half of the Great Basin. However, ERCs are lower as you move further north. But again, this is not what's really been driving fire activity, as most of the fire activity has been driven by our lower elevation grasses. And those fuel moistures are better represented by our 10-hour fuel moistures, which have been very low across most areas of the Great Basin. Also, as we have been reporting, fine fuel loading is above normal over much of western and northern Nevada, into northern Utah and southern Idaho, and again, this is where we're really seeing our large fire activity, which has been driven by grasses. Obviously, we had large fire activity in southwest Utah, which has been driven by our larger fuels. Looking at our satellite loop from today, you can see a trough of low pressure now moving eastward across the Great Basin, which has still been producing some thunderstorms which continue during the overnight and early morning hours across the northern portion of the basin. We will continue to see some lightning activity again today across Idaho, far northern Utah, and Wyoming, which will also be a mix of wet and dry. Now looking at the weather pattern for later today, as that trough of low pressure swings eastward, we will continue to see some lightning activity with some very light showers across Idaho, Wyoming, into far northern Utah today, with still dry and breezy conditions over the southern portion of the basin, which is where we continue to see those high risk for windy conditions and low relative humidity. Again, further north, we will likely see some new initial attack across parts of eastern Idaho into Wyoming and northern Utah, but these are areas where the fuels haven't quite completely cured out, but we will continue to monitor that. Relative humidity again will remain below 5 or 10% over the southern half of the basin and a little bit higher further north. And again, those wind gusts will mainly be across the eastern side of the Great Basin, but also across southern Idaho, where we do have obviously some large fire activity. We will see northwest wind gusts between 25 and 30 miles per hour. However, relative humidity will be a little bit higher. As we move into Wednesday, this trough swings eastward, and we have another cold front dropping south, which will enhance the winds over southern and eastern Utah and still continue with some isolated lightning and shower activity up across eastern Idaho into Wyoming. So again, we are high-risking those gusty winds and dry conditions over southern and eastern Utah into the Arizona Strip on Wednesday. Relative humidity again below 10% really across the southern areas of the Great Basin, and you can see the wind field on the right showing those winds increasing with gusts above 35 or 40 miles per hour expected on Wednesday. Again, across southern Idaho, despite slightly higher relative humidity, we will continue to see breezy northwest winds. By Thursday, the ridge of high pressure starts to build along the west coast with decreasing winds over the eastern side of the Great Basin. Therefore, we do not have any high risk for Thursday, but still expect some moderate northwest winds to continue across Idaho and Utah. Again, they will be weaker than what we'll see today and Wednesday. Relative humidity still remaining quite low across the southern half to two-thirds of the Great Basin, again with those breezy northwest winds. Overall forecast amounts of precipitation are generally light associated with thunderstorm activity. However, our better chances of wetting rains will be in the northern part of the central Idaho mountains into Wyoming. As we move into Friday, we do have a weak trough of low pressure approaching the west coast, and we will continue to watch this for any potential thunderstorm activity along the Sierra front. However, right now, any activity looks like it'd be very isolated, if at all, but we will continue to monitor this, again, with any possible moisture creeping up into that area. The rest of the Great Basin will remain dry with decreasing winds. On Saturday, that low may drop south. Again, we could see some moisture, enough for some thunderstorm activity in the northern part of the basin on Saturday, but right now it looks to be fairly isolated, with no high risk issued at this time. On Sunday, generally dry conditions return to most of the Great Basin. As we move into Monday, these conditions continue as well. We may see some moisture move into the northern part of the area starting on Monday for a return of some lightning activity, and we will continue to monitor this. No real changes in the overall precipitation for the next 7 days, as most of what we'll see will happen over today and tomorrow in generally the central Idaho mountains. Our 8 to 14 day outlook, which takes us through the first week of July through July 10th, shows generally warm and dry conditions across the Great Basin, and this below normal potential for precipitation over Utah and the Arizona Strip is indicative of a delayed monsoon. Therefore, we will see below normal precipitation as we move into the early part of July, which is typically when the monsoon would have started. That concludes our briefing for today. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. Thank you for listening.